Hi, I'm Peter Prevost, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use Emacs Org mode as a LaTeX editor to create PDF files. The configuration we'll use in this video is the Emacs Writing Studio configuration, which is written for researchers and authors, and it's also a book and a website for those of you who would like to know more about this fantastic software. So let's stop talking and start doing. So I've created this little demo file to show you all the different aspects of exporting Org mode to PDF through LaTeX. It's a little demo file. The image here gives a little bit of a reminder what it is that we're doing. We have an Org mode file, which is also linked to my bibliography. And if we want to create a PDF, then first we use Org to export that to LaTeX, and then LaTeX itself will then turn that into a PDF file. And Org mode will all do that conveniently for you within a few keystrokes. So let's see what this looks like. We'll open the export dispatcher, select export to LaTeX, and then O for PDF and open. So what's happening now is that Org mode creates the text file, and then it activates LaTeX to create this PDF. And there we go. That is the basic principle, and it works out of the box without any configuration. Now, a few comments here. This is the article class, and I'll show you later how to modify all that. So anything you see here, just like any other LaTeX editor, can be configured. So what's happening here? Going back to my auto buffer, if I export again, but this time to a LaTeX buffer, I can see what's happening. So here's my text file. You see there's a bunch of standard packages that Org mode inserts, and that's all configurable. We'll get to that. Then is my author, which is pulled from the front matter. The date is \today, which is a LaTeX command, but it could be anything. You could just write something in there if you want. We have a title, and you see that the word LaTeX, if it's spelled with the appropriate capitalization, it will turn it into a LaTeX command. And then here's the hyperref setup, and we'll show you how to fill those empty boxes. Now we have make title, and there's the introduction and the text. You see also that any quotation marks are converted to appropriate LaTeX format. Here we also have the M dashes and the N dashes. And what happens here is the image link is turned into an include graphics. It hasn't got a float yet, and we'll see in a second how to do this. So this is the basic principle of exporting to LaTeX. Now let's look at the image here. We have an attribute here for Org mode that just sets the width at 900 pixels on this screen. I can also add a caption, Org mode export workflow. And the other thing I can add here are attributes for LaTeX. For example, I want the width to be 0.5, make it 6.7 of the text width. And if I now export this, you see that that is being taken into consideration. Reopen, yes. There we go. We can also do something different here. For example, change the float. So the float can become a wrap, for example. And then here at the bottom, we might add a little bit more text. Some lorem ipsum. There we go. And now processing this LaTeX file will give a new PDF file, and this time the text is wrapped around the image. There we go. The manual, the Org mode manual, has extensive description of all the different parameters that you can use, but this is the basic idea of adding an image to a LaTeX export. Adding tables with LaTeX can be frustrating, but with Org mode, it's a breeze. So here's a table I prepared earlier. It's just a small little table with a caption and a name that we can use for cross-referencing. I can export this to LaTeX source code, and here at the bottom we see the wonderful tabular environment for LaTeX. I can of course also export this to a PDF file. Yes. Okay. There's our table. Now there are various configurations we can add to this to fine-tune what our table looks like. Now, for example, I'm just adding a couple lines here. That the LaTeX header is a line that's added to the preamble, so we can add a use package declaration here for the tabular X package. And then my LaTeX attributes are that I'm going to use this environment for this particular table. Then I've got some alignment criteria, and that the width of this table will be 2/3 of the width of the text rather than the small size we have now. And opening that PDF file again, we can see any second that we now have a very different table with the tabular X environment. Again, the alt mode manual has a lot of details on how to configure your tables. Also, you can do more complex tables, and that's uses the built-in table package by Takai Ota. And let me pop in an example here. So this is the table package. This is no longer an alt mode table. So you see if I hit tab here, it says that I need to edit this using table.l, but that's outside the scope of this video. So I've got a caption, and what I've also done here is an attribute to make this a sideways table. So we can again export this to a PDF file. And voila, here's the table of German article declensions by gender and case, just in case you were interested. So now that we inserted some plain text, some image, a table, we can also add specific LaTeX, because not every situation in your LaTeX document might be available to you through alt mode code. So there's always a need to add some specific LaTeX commands. Now, in principle, what you can do, you can just type, for example, H-line here, and that will become a line in your LaTeX output. But the problem is that this word here, \H-line, will also appear in any HTML output or Word document output, because it's just a bit of plain text. So the way to alleviate that is to add a LaTeX keyword in front of it, and then that way we get a horizontal line only in LaTeX. And for example, if I also wanted a line in HTML, I could do something like this. And now in both outputs, there will be a line at that specific location. So that's the first thing to do. The second way to add specific LaTeX is with a source block, which we can insert here. So it starts with begin export LaTeX, and anything in between there is only exported in the LaTeX document. So we could do something like this to create some nice big text. Then there's also a possibility to create inline text. And the way to do that is by typing && LaTeX colon, just to indicate that this is only for LaTeX output. And for example, color box, yellow, and then the word highlight, or whatever it is you want to do, and close that like this. So here's a bit of LaTeX that will create color, but we do need to add a package. So we can again add to the LaTeX header, use package, color. Let's see if this worked, and export this to PDF. So if you want inline text, for example, to also have highlighted text in HTML, you can add a HTML variant to that as well. So then your document will export to all the different formats equally. And that's exactly how I created the EWS book. So here's that example. So that's inline text. Other forms of inline text is, of course, mathematics, and anything that is between dollar signs will appear as a formula. And EWS is configured in the way that they are automatically previewed with a special package. So this mathematics is pretty straightforward. Then the third thing I'd like to show you is a macro. Macros are very useful. Now, let's say, for example, that you want to highlight bits of text all around your document. You don't want to have to type all this stuff in all the time. So we can create a macro. And the macro in our case would be exactly what we see above, but with some parameters. Again, we got a color box, yellow. And then we say $1 for the first parameter and close this off. That's our macro. And now, example of and we can say now, we just have to, oh, sorry, the macro needs to have a name. So let's call it HL. 3 curly braces, HL, and then between parentheses we say macro and close it 3. There we go. So now we have a macro that's called HL. That macro consists of this particular text and it has one parameter. So in this case we have this highlight macro with the as parameter 1 the word macro. And when we export that, we'll see that we'll get exactly the same thing as above. So these are several different ways of including LaTeX within your document to create more complex environments. For example, TRKZ or other things that I usually use it regularly for. Now let's add some citations to this document. To go to the beginning of the header. And by default, the global bibliography is available for editing, but we can also add a local bibliography, so a bibliography that will only apply to the file we're working on. To do this, we add a little line that I created earlier. Here we are. And by Control-C and apostrophe, we can open that file, and here's the bibliography that is now attached to this document. So we can add a citation, and here's one I prepared earlier, but to do that is Control-C, Control-X, ampersand, and then we select Ahrens. And for example, we can also add Stallman just for demonstration, and by adding tab, we can add more and more citations. So here we are. Now, I can also change the order of these citations, but that's all explained in the book and in a previous video. Now, what does Org mode do when we export this? Org mode has 3 different ways to process citations. The first one is the basic processor. Let's create the LaTeX source code, and what we see here is that LaTeX has converted this citation to a bit of text, and that's now the citation. We can also add a bibliography here at the bottom. So we can add a bibliography. So I gave this heading a name, references, and then print bibliography will print the bibliography. Let's export this again. Go down the bottom, and now we see here that also the bibliography is added, but as text, not as LaTeX commands. So this is the basic citation editor. And in the book, but also in the Org mode manual, it's explained in detail how you can configure exactly how these look. Now, the basic citation is great for little draft documents. It's not so good for real production work. The second method we have available is using citation style language. So to do that, we use a keyword. And for the citation line, so the keyword is a cite export command and a cite export keyword. And what we add to here now is that we want to use CSL, citation style language. And I have a little file that I downloaded from the CSL library, which is for APA 6. So we can now again export this to LaTeX. And what we see now is that we have a bit of LaTeX edited for the CSL bibliography. That's automatically added by org mode. Then the citation itself, we're going to CSL citation, and it looks like this, RNs 2017, which is APA style. And at the bottom here, again, this is all converted to text. We also have our bibliography. So this is what it looks like when we turn this to PDF. Now the CSL is very good. It's especially useful for HTML documents and word processor documents, but it's not really the LaTeX way. So the LaTeX way is, there we are, here are the references, and the citation is on the first page. So to turn this into proper LaTeX citations and bibliography, we can use a different site export method. And for example, we want to use netbib and Clue, just as an example, but this is highly configurable. And again, the org mode manual and the EWS book explains this in a bit more detail. Now, if we export this to LaTeX, we'll see here that org mode has automatically inserted the netbib package, because that's what we asked for. And it has used the proper LaTeX commands to add those citations. And the bibliography here is, again, the way we expect it in the LaTeX document. So we can again export this to a PDF to see the final result. There's our citations. And here on page 2, we have the references in the Clue formatting system. So we've now seen a lot of different ways to add content to a org mode document and convert that through LaTeX into PDF. But we've used the standard preamble. So let's now have another look. What is happening here is that LaTeX uses a templating system to create the preamble for your document. Now in this case, this is the article command, but LaTeX can, org mode can contain quite a few different configurations. So you could have a configuration, for example, for a book that you're writing, and the EWS configuration contains the preamble or the configuration for the paperback book. But you can also have other ones in your collection, for example, for journals that you write, for a dissertation that you're putting together for your university, or whatever you need. So it's a good way to create templates of your LaTeX files. Now, how does that work? What is happening here is that org mode has a few variables. The first variable is org LaTeX default packages A list. Now let's have a look. HV org LaTeX default packages A list. This is a list of packages that, unless otherwise instructed, org mode will always add to the output. So here we are. This is the value. These are all the packages, and that's exactly what we see here in this preamble. So that's the variable. Let's write it down here. Org LaTeX default packages A list. So that contains all packages for all exports, unless excluded. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. The second variable that's important is org LaTeX packages A list. And you'll see that this variable is, in this case, empty, because these are the packages that you can configure in the same way as the previous variable to always include in your outputs. So I could, for example, set this to include TRKZ or the Tabular X environment, or whatever it is that you always refer back to. And then the third method is the extra bits, which is what we've seen earlier. That is when you say the LaTeX header keyword. When you add this, that's called the extra packages. So these are 3 levels to control the packages that appear in your preamble. Now let's have a play with this. And I'll copy a bit of elist code across. So add to list org LaTeX classes. So org LaTeX classes is a variable that contains all the classes that you are working with. Now these are not classes in LaTeX, these are org mode classes. So for example, we can write here LaTeX class article. That's what we've been working with. That's the standard for this for org mode. But here I configured a new one that I call minimal. The only thing I want to appear in this preamble is document class article. No default packages, so whatever is in that first variable will be ignored. No packages, whatever is in the second variable will be ignored. And then the next bit in this declaration is a list that associates in this case, the first Emacs level header. So 1 asterisk becomes a section, 2 asterisks becomes a subsection, and so on and so on. Now, when we look at this variable, it looks a bit messy because what I have here, this is the minimal one that I declared earlier. And somewhere down here, there's also here's the EWS configuration as well. And there's the original one, which is a bit more easy to read. So we have article, which is the document class. It's the only thing it declares. But it also includes the default packages. And then I have section, subsection, subsection, etc. If it's a report, heading 1 is a part. If it's a book, heading 1 is a chapter. So this is how you can create a collection of standard LaTeX preambles for the types of things that you write. So now we can say here that we want minimal. Well, you see here that we only have the document class article exactly as we asked for. There's no default packages and no standard packages, personal packages. We still have use package, tabular X, and color because that's what we defined further down below with the extra LaTeX headers. And we have the hyperref setup. Now the hyperref setup becomes pointless because we haven't actually called that package. Now if we set this org LaTeX with hyperref to nil and then export again, you'll see that hyperref has now disappeared. So you see that org mode provides very detailed configurations to turn your org mode file into a LaTeX file that then becomes a PDF file. I've shown you all the basics of how it works. If you want to read more about it, you can find this in the manual. So Ctrl-H-R, we have the org manual, and then G LaTeX export. And there we go. So section 13.10 of the manual provides very detailed instructions on everything that I've done here. You can, of course, also read the Emacs Writing Studio book if you're interested. So thanks for watching this video. If you like what I do here, if you'd like to support my work, consider buying the Emacs Writing Studio book, available as a paperback, completely written in Emacs with the Emacs Writing Studio configuration. Also available as an ebook, but the source files, all the org mode files that created this book are freely available on the GitHub repository, which is in the description. In future videos, I'll dig a little bit deeper in how to export org mode to an ebook and also how to create Word documents.